Hey, here I am. Overkill Reviews bootleg version. You're all gonna realize why we need an editor after we watch this. And you know, our producer, Lisa Ladiseur, may or may not have just walked in front of the camera, but that's what we embrace here at Overkill Reviews bootleg. Okay, what I'm doing for you today is reviewing a record that I can't possibly not review. And that is the brand new album from At the Gates called To Drink from the Night Itself. It's released today worldwide on Century Media. I got the album art here, complete with printer smudging from the Banger printer. And you know, people are asking, you know, what about the video clips? But I got something for you right here. It's heavy. Really fucking heavy. Doesn't sound very heavy. Do I need to hold it closer to my mic for it to work? I mean, a lot of you guys know the story, but we'll do the brief version. 1990, Gothenburg, Sweden. 4 albums, 4 years. Red in the Sky is Out, With Fear I Kiss the Burning Dark, Terminal Spirit Disease, Slaughter of the Soul, Slaughter of the Soul, Slaughter of the Soul, recognized one of the all-time greatest extreme metal albums that kick-started melodic death metal, blah, blah, blah. You all know the story. If you don't, we made a documentary about Slaughter of the Soul as part of our Metal Evolution albums series, so go and check that out. Okay, so At the Gates, full disclosure, massive fan. And, you know, this is always a heady exercise for me. It feels like, you know, world peace is at stake whenever I have to review a record of a band that I really and truly love. I think the interesting thing about this record is really, it's almost like the band's second record. It's kind of like the sophomore release, because the band came back in 2014 with At War with Reality, which was the first record they had done in 19 years. And in that period of 19 years, the album Slaughter of the Soul had become this classic. And so obviously huge amounts of pressure and anticipation on that record. And then, like many bands will tell you, like, you spend your whole youth making your first record, and then within a few years you have to put out your second one. And it almost feels like that may be the case here with To Drink from the Night Itself. Also, Anders Bjorler, founding guitarist, brother of bassist Jonas Bjorler, left the band prior to the release of, or the recording of this record, therefore leaving what may seem like a big songwriting gap with At the Gates, because he was a lead songwriter with his brother. So brother Jonas picks up the reins, and the other Jonas, maybe the guy with the most metal name in the history of metal, except for Bradley Zorgdrager, and that's Jonas Stahlhammer, joins the ranks. So I was curious to see how things would transpire. It's pretty clear from the very first track, which is an instrumental, short instrumental track called Der Widerstand, pardon my German, very classical, stripped down. And right away, it's different than the intros we've had to Slaughter the Soul or At War with Reality, which are much more atmospheric, experimental. This is much more consistent with an intro they would have had on one of their first couple of records. Acoustic guitars, classical strings are really kind of stripped down. So intriguing start. Then it launches into the title track, To Drink from the Night Itself, and immediately I think it creates a divide where the main riff in this song is so classic At the Gates, to the point where, you know, they're at a point now where they can almost parody themselves. I mean, it's very akin to arguably the most famous riff in the band's career, that's Blinded by Fear, where it's that thrash beat combined with a very singable guitar line. And I realize also, the sound here is very distinctive because what At the Gates did is they tuned way down, I think to B or C, but they play these thrash riffs, which has that speed and intensity of thrash, but also that really low, brutal sound that you get with death metal. I'm pretty hooked. It's already a classic. Moving forward in the album, it's clear that while retaining elements of the more modern, thrashy sound of the band, there's a lot more of the kind of high-picking, sorrowful, melancholic, and really more black metal side of At the Gates than their more recent records. It's a more moody record overall, therefore. It's less about the riff, it's less about the structure and the production. This album feels so far like it's more about the feel. Daggers of Black Haze, which is also a video track released, is a classic example of that, and for me actually has probably one of the best parts of an At the Gates song I've ever heard, where it breaks down to acoustic guitars, these thumping drums, the strings come in, and then Thomas Lindberg's voice comes over top. It's about halfway through the song. It's a goosebumper, fucking amazing. Really, really, really liked it. The downside to this record, it feels like the middle third, the band kind of goes on cruise control. The Chasm, in Nameless Sleep, The Colors of the Beast. In the center of the record, it reveals what I think are the potential downsides of this direction. This particular sound of At the Gates is that I think the well can run dry pretty quickly on those high, more black metal, more melancholic guitar lines. It just seems like there's only so many places you can go with that. It's very mid-paced, and there's really nothing much that stands out for me in the middle of the record, which is hard for me to say because admittedly I want to like every track on the record. Moving forward though, Labyrinth of Tombs, we kind of come back, I feel, to where the record started. It's a much thrashier number. It's got a better mixture of what At the Gates have to offer. It actually really brings together sort of the Slaughter of the Soul, At War with Reality At the Gates with the earlier songs. And it made me realize, although I'm not a producer, and there's a reason why I'm not, because I can't produce, but that track I feel like should have been earlier in the album to kind of give it a bit of a punch in the middle of the record. Also a standout on Labyrinth of Tombs is that there's a solo. I don't know if it's a Stahlhammer solo, but it sounds like it might be because it's different. Björn Anders was never really sort of the classic virtuosic fretboard gymnastics soloist. He was more of playing off the idea of the main riff or playing off of the melodies of the record. And Stahlhammer is doing something new here, and it made me realize, by track 9, I was like, oh, shit. I kind of felt like maybe more of Stahlhammer's identity could have been on this record earlier on. So, it'll be interesting to see what he brings to the band. It'll be that gentle balance, right? What can he bring without that fits the At the Gates sort of paradigm, so to speak, but still pushes the sound forward. So I was kind of intrigued by that moment in that song and wanted to hear more. Soon after that, In Death They Shall Burn, another more of a thrashy number that has this really cool thrash break that's like old school. It's like old school but new school. I don't know what school I'm in anymore because it was like Power Trip or Vector. It was like this high up the neck, almost retro thrash riff that struck me as being really out of the ordinary for At the Gates, but I actually thought worked really well and was kind of like a burst of fresh air towards the end of the record. The album closes with The Mirror Black, a slow, plodding 6/8 death march. Not unusual of At the Gates kind of reminds me of The Night Eternal on At War with Reality. It's actually only really half a song because about the midway point, it breaks down completely back to a classical arrangement. Right where we started with track 1, I'm a bass player, and it has these immense low bowed bass parts. At the end, it makes me think of Wagner, or even the octabass, which we talked about in Headbanger's Journey many years ago. But I thought that was a really cool section and brought the album full circle to where it started with that more very European classical sound. So, what to say all in? I think the production on this record is going to divide people. I think it sounds like it's a very conscious decision not to sound like At War with Reality. At War with Reality was a very modern, relatively clean sound for a band like At the Gates. A lot of crunch in the riffs. You can hear the pick hit the strings. And it suited that record because Anders, obviously being part of that record, that seems to be more his sensibility. This record almost feels like an intentional nod to the production values of the earlier records, not just the songwriting, which I'm not sure totally works because particularly in that midsection of the album, it tends to get a bit lost. Like you can't really hear what's going on. It's a bit messy. And I just thought that the production, I wasn't sure worked for this album because At the Gates has come so far since Terminal Spirit Disease that I'm not sure this production approach really suits the At the Gates of today. And for those of you who know, I fucking loved At War with Reality. I argued that it was one of the best comeback records in the history of extreme metal, and I was brave enough to say it rivaled Slaughter of the Soul, which is almost like I'm going to get burned at the stake by the metal masses for even saying that. But I thought it was a really, really strong comeback record. And so, this one really has a lot to stand up to. So there you have it. I think it's a strong record overall. It's At the Gates. And, when you're at the gates, you're a band of that stature, I think you can start to repeat some ideas. Why? Well, because you created them in the first place. So it's okay. The rest of the bands I've been talking about are here because of them. But I thought at times it veered on being repetitious. But all in all, it's 4 out of 5 skulls for me because it's At the Gates and it will probably grow with time and I'll like it better as the weeks, months, and years go by. Thank you for joining me on the very bootleg edition with my polka dot glass. But before you go, reminder that if you want more than just bootleg versions of Overkill reviews, you want to see Overkill every week and you want all the bells and whistles and to see everything we have to offer at BangerTV, please contribute, become a patron, join the tribe. Thank you. See you next time.